Hi, I'm Gina-R-Farrar, reinvention coach, creator and host of Feminine Roadmap podcast, and leader of this amazing global community of women. If you are approaching midlife or are already in the thick of it, welcome home. Please grab a cup of something wonderful and join me for some real talk, practical strategies, and a big dose of sisterhood. I am so glad you're here. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and changes of life. And today, the challenge we're going to be talking about is the changes that come along in our career life. Careers aren't done when we hit 50. There is so much possibility and potential that we can't see unless we go looking for it. And so my guest today is Lucia-knight. She is a midlife career satisfaction designer and the author of X-Change, How to Torch Your Work Treadmill. And she's here today to encourage you in your work journey. Lucia, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey there, Gina. I'm so excited to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
You know, I haven't had a ton of career conversations, but I love that your website, Midlife Unstuck, it was like this resonance in my soul. And when I found out that your focus was that just because you're 50 or you're in that mid-range, the end of your life is not near. There are still potentials and possibilities. So I instantly was like, yes, we can sing this song together. So tell me what it is that led you to this specific message.
Okay, so I was one of the people that I'm trying to talk to now. So I spent 20 years in a career. I was a headhunter. I traveled all over the UK. I was promoted to Australia. I spent 5 years in Sydney, and I literally was on this treadmill, you know, and I had 2 children. They were relatively young. But at some point, I think I was 43 or 44, I sort of had a wake up moment where I just thought, this isn't where I want to be. This isn't what I'm not doing what I love. I'm doing work that doesn't matter enough to me, and I need to do something different. And I do not advise this to any of my clients, but I'm going to try to be openly vulnerable. I messed it all up. So what I decided to do was escape. And I escaped to study a master's in psychology, which was an area that I have been all throughout my life very interested in. But I wasn't clear that that was my plan B. I was very clear that I needed to leave and escape from where I was. So 18 months later, I finished a full-time master's, full-time mum for the first time in my life. And I woke up knee-walkingly exhausted. I did something like 16 exams, 16 assignments, a dissertation. The rough title of the dissertation is "Where's all the 50-year-olds gone from corporates?" But I was totally exhausted. And at that point, I had an epiphany that career change at this age cannot be this difficult. And so that's when I started a slightly different journey, which is how do people change careers after 40, 45 and 50? Do they do it? How do they do it? And so I started in my network, and I found that I did not know one human being who had changed career after 45 and was happier for it. So what I found were people who had retrained or made slight shifts, but they weren't any happier, and often they were less happy. So then I realized I was stuck in my network. My peer group were not going to help me. So I sought out, and I went to social media, I went to LinkedIn, I went to friends of friends. Somebody must know somebody who has changed career late in their career, you know, after 20 years or so of working. And I found 1 or 2, and they referred me to another 1 or 2. And when I found 10-ish, I knew there were millions. And my windows, my eyes were closed. I had my blinkers on, and they just came off. So then I decided that I was going to aim to talk to 100 individuals over the age of 40. That's what I put my cutoff at 40, who had changed careers successfully, but successfully defined as were happier, described themselves as happier or more satisfied afterwards. So in doing that, I attracted a little bit of attention from a publisher, and he wanted to understand if I understood the patterns behind change at this age. And I did. So I find 8 different patterns that seem to go with every single one of these career change, and that became my book. And in doing that, I learned so much about, I guess, how we limit ourselves at this age and how we cap our potential. And I got very, very excited about helping people who were in a similar place to me. Now, it's now 5 or 6 years ago, but who were stuck, particularly in corporate life, and staring up, either up the ladder or across, and seeing very few people to aspire towards. And by that, I mean the 50-plus-year-olds in the UK. I don't know lots about the US market, but in the UK, 50-year-olds seem to disappear from big old corporates. And it's a really worrying situation because most of us have to work, certainly in the UK, till we're something like 65, unless we have some sort of golden egg put away somewhere. You know, it really, really challenges us in the UK. How do we get another 15 years of economic strength? You know, where do we do it? How do we do it? Has everybody paid off their mortgage at the age of 50? No. But also...
And have the happiness as well.
Absolutely.
Not just the money, but the enjoyment or the purpose.
Absolutely. And so many things combined to be the most interesting super problem I could ever imagine. And it gets me super excited to try to solve this 1 or 2 people at a time.
You know, it's so true. It is definitely a dynamic that we experience in America too. I mean, I think that we definitely have paradigms around specific ages. And so there's the problem of experience and pay scale that comes with being with a company 20, 25 years. And you have these eager younger people who they don't have the experience, but they also don't have the opinion or the kind of, people would say, set in their ways.
Yeah.
When you have someone,
wisdom or experience, or you could say it lots of ways. Yes, but there's baggage.
There's baggage with that.
Experience brings. Yes.
A lot of times flexibility doesn't come with the package. And so you got the pay, they can hire someone younger without the experience, but they pay a whole lot less, and they're willing to take that, quote, risk or gamble because it's a financial decision. So yes, there is this kind of invisibility that happens around a certain age. I would say between 50 and 55, where you see a lot of, we call them golden handshakes.
Yeah, totally. Same in the UK. Okay. Yes. So they silently disappear. They may silently disappear with a little bag of cash, but they are disappearing quietly. Yeah, it's really clear, really common. And when that happens, it's a forced point of reevaluation. Yeah. So those individuals did not choose that to happen. They accepted that it happened and they made the most of it. What I'm trying to do is catch people a little bit earlier than that so that they turn off the autopilot that imagines that they will stay here for another 5 or 10 or whatever years. Literally turn it off and wake up. I guess the unusual combination of what do they want from the rest of their career? Are there ways that they could use the skills that they have loved using in their life totally differently? So I'd say 50% of the clients that I work with, either in groups or individuals, just tweak their career. So they might tweak who their client is, how they're paid, how often they work, where they work, you know, so they make some changes, but 50% make some radical changes and leave corporate life behind because they want the control.
And that's kind of scary because I think we're thinking security, like you said, 15 more years. So it's almost like I'm just going to put my seatbelt on and ride this thing out.
Yes. And I can empathize with that because I was kind of there. But when I worked in one of the biggest FTSE 250 businesses in the UK. So when I looked above me, around me to see where are the older people, there were 2 people over the age of 50 in one of the largest businesses in the UK. So the writing is on the wall. I'm just not sure enough people are seeing it. Okay. But I guess that's a little bit of a negative stance, but I'm trying to wake people up to say, this is your choice. But the other thing is sometimes if you're in that sort of mindset where autopilot is on, you're not in charge of using the skills that you love to use. So if you are John and you've been here for 25 years and an opportunity comes up for a sideways move somewhere else in a different department, you're likely to take it, whether it uses your superpowers or not. And superpowers is a concept I'd love to talk to you about because I think it's the biggest nugget of wisdom that I talk to people about. So if I can define it for you. So I define superpowers in a career as the activities that an individual does that they cannot stop doing. Time passes really quickly when they do it. When they're doing these activities, it literally feels good in the stomach or somewhere else in your body. For me, I can feel it in my stomach. So your body tells you you're doing good stuff. It comes more naturally to you, and you are likely to be better at it than most people in your network and possibly in the world. How's that for a big statement?
Okay, so let's break this down. So we have the activities that you do that you cannot stop doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with that, my little parenthetical addition is, so you don't recognize it.
You don't know. I've never met anybody. I've met people who've done a lot of work who could tell me their strengths. Yeah. And they could make a very good guess, but they're very rare.
Mm-hmm. It's because it's literally like breathing. You just don't see the value because it's so easy for you.
Totally.
Time passes quickly. There's a gift.
Yeah. If you've got 15 years to earn money, you want to do it. You want to feel that you could do this forever, that it's not draining you and that you really want to use this skill. You really want to get paid to use this skill.
Yeah, it's like the switch from work to purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then your body feels good. I really like that because, it's like your body is your best indicator. You can call it intuition, you can call it whatever you want, but it's like, it's easier to identify when you don't feel right about it.
Absolutely.
Your body's like, this isn't,
mm-hmm.
You shouldn't do this, or I wish we weren't doing this, or why in the world am I doing this? I think we're naturally inclined to identify negative quicker.
Yeah.
So I think this is that paradigm shift, right? From, I don't want to do this the rest of my life to, ooh, I want to do this.
Exactly. And that shift happens when you know your superpowers. I have seen it in front of my eyes. So when you make that shift from I don't want to do this to I really, really want to do that, you feel it in your body. And that is a gigantic shift. And you feel it in your body, but we're not connected enough often to our bodies to be able to recognize that. But we are very connected to when things feel bad. Mm-hmm. But when things feel great, we kind of quash it or put it to the side or think it's not that valuable. Or if things come easily to us, it's not that valuable. When actually that's what we need to focus on. That's where the magic is. And when I say so I have this program called Discover Your Superpowers, and I can see it, that shift when I say, these are your 4 superpowers. Yeah. Now you could have endless numbers of superpowers, but when I spend 3 to 4 hours with one individual and we do a career reevaluation, I go off, and one of my superpowers is actually finding the patterns in human behavior that allows them or me to connect the dots in a different way. So when I say, here are the 4 superpowers, in your language, so the words that this individual uses, a light goes on. And I say, can you imagine getting paid to use these 4 skills every day of the week? And they mostly go, I don't know if that's possible, but oh my God. And then I say, can you imagine getting paid to use these 4 skills 50% of the week? And they go, oh my God, that would be amazing. Yeah. I've never met anybody who uses their superpowers 100% of the time. I think it's unrealistic. You know, we have to do things that we don't want to do or that aren't our superpowers. But if we don't design our work around these core superpowers, then we're missing a link, we're missing an opportunity, and we're certainly not doing work that is fulfilling enough for us as humans.
And when you talk about that light bulb going on, I coach women as well. I help them kind of transform their stories, identify the things we say and think that are essentially holding us back. So we're speaking the same language with maybe a little bit different focus. You know, there is this moment where they're caught off guard by their own belief system. Like when you shine back at them something, whether it's positive or negative, it's like all of us have things that we say and do and expect, or has become expected of us to the degree that now we expect it of ourselves, right? By the time we hit 40, 50 years old, we're a conglomeration of beliefs and paradigms that have been given to us from childhood, you know, family input, the friends that we keep, the colleagues that we work with. And there's this, like you called it, a blinder. It's like there's this veil between us and that next level of truth for us. Because I think sometimes those truths made sense at some point.
Oh, they would have done. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone in and stayed in. They would have been relevant to protect or enable or whatever the purpose was. They would have had a purpose. So, and it sounds as if the work that you do just takes the veil off, and you're particularly doing it in one area, and I'm just particularly doing it around career. Yeah. So I've got a narrow focus, but of course, career is life, isn't it? That's the core focus of my work, but it sounds like we're doing very, very similar work.
Yeah, it is interesting because wouldn't you agree, Lucia, that there's paradigms, especially if you've worked somewhere for 20 years, like this is my job, this is what I do, this is who I am.
Love it. Absolutely. Of course. So one of the exercises I do with individuals is about redefining success today.
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds like you maybe do something similar, but you know, the success, you know, if I take my own example, the success that I spent 20 years, you know, was about travel, nice car, nice family, nice house, moving up a ladder, being respected at work. You know, that just crumbled when I had a look at what success meant to me. I had to redefine what kind of mum I wanted to be, what kind of wife I wanted to be, what kind of earner I wanted to be, what kind of holidays I went on. Endless. You know, I redefined my identity by redefining my definition of success. And this is hard work. Do you find it when you're working with people? It's hard work for people.
You know, we're creatures of comfort, right? We look for that rut in the road that will keep us the safest, the most comfortable, the most provided for. And I'm not knocking that because that's how we are wired. So this feels so risky to question ourselves and to question our reality because it feels certain. But like you're saying, it really isn't, because you couldn't look up and find more than 2 people in the biggest company in the UK. There were over 50. So is it really as certain as we think it is? So I feel like your work paradigm comes from, okay, before you challenge your own feelings, look around.
Literally look around. On my website, I've been writing a blog for years, and the most read blog is called 50-Year-Old Corporate Toast. Now, it's a little harsh, admittedly, but it tells you there are, 4 types of toast. You're either aware and you're, lining your pockets and you're thinking what you can do next, or you're semi-aware and you're talking to people in your community, you're looking at next moves, etc. Or, worst case, you don't have a clue and you are working hard, giving 100%, doing the best work you possibly can, and the toaster is being turned up Yeah, you are getting burnt and you don't even know it. Yeah. And, I didn't make it to that, but it wouldn't have been hard. It's not hard for me to imagine just closing down that bit of my brain and continuing to be toasted. And I watched colleagues be toasted in front of me or leave meetings and be toasted that day. Like, it starts to become very aware that it is not safe. The familiar is not safe. The familiar people, the familiar structures, it's just not safe. There is a saber-toothed tiger, but it's in your company. And I'm not trying to make anyone feel afraid. I really am just trying to wake up individuals to their endless potential, but it's beyond the corporate life normally.
I think what I hear you saying is that even if you are doing your best work and you're all in, that doesn't guarantee.
Exactly. And just a little awareness about that will save the scarring and the trauma when it does happen. And in my experience in the UK, it is a when, not an if.
I think that's true here too, especially in the corporate arena. You have a lot of, although the landscape is changing a little bit to the more gig economy, how is that impacting what you're experiencing?
Okay, so it's really good. As we've talked about before, how easy it is to set up a new idea, how easy it is to do your paintings at home and to put them on Etsy or put them on, you can get your ideas and your stuff out there more easily. So what I'm seeing is that 50% of my clients who are doing something different or tweaking something or trying to do something different, but they have to keep on the path to pay the mortgage or whatever, those individuals are finding it a really interesting time because they can experiment without risking everything. They can have a hobby business on the side using their superpowers, investigate whether that's photography or leather making or bread making or whatever it is. They get to try a little business to see if actually it is using their superpowers. Because if your side gig, is absolutely exhausting, it's not the right side gig. So I try to help people to design their side gig around the most energizing. If you're using your superpowers, you want to use them. You can't stop using them. They give you energy. You could often use them for 3 hours and you have more energy at the end than you do at the beginning. So that's what I encourage people to develop their little experimental businesses around, their superpowers, but in the evening or the weekend. So I've interviewed 100 people who change stories, and the poster child for this sort of mini changes, experimental changes, is a lady called Kate. So Kate was in aerospace and defense. She had 3 children, no time, every penny was going towards the mortgage, but she decided to start up a little gin making business with her friend. So that's all they did in their kitchen. They called it the gin kitchen. So she and her friend in their kitchens after the kids were asleep or at the weekend in spare hours would attempt to create the finest gin in the world. And they had no money, so they decided to allocate exactly the amount of money they normally spent per month on gin to buying a secondhand still, and just tiny little botanicals. So they're 5 years in now, and one of them is full-time employed as the CEO of that business. But even when they just had it as a little part-time business, they pitched it to some major retailers and won Gin of the Month. And they couldn't fulfill the orders because they didn't have a big manufacturing. So they couldn't do anything about it. But they got great media from it and PR. So it can be done with very little money and very little time, as long as you're using your superpowers.
That goes back to that time passes quickly, and that awareness around, I think we have stories when it comes to work specifically, like what is legitimate and what is not legitimate, right? Did you come up against that barrier of there was a time when people were like, you can't make money being an artist, or you can't make money being whatever. And I do believe that the internet has changed the conversation to a degree, positive and negative, that we could never have imagined. you
I
know?
love the idea of legitimate. I love that idea. I've not really thought about it that way, but that's brilliant. But it does come back to how we've been brought up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do we expect work to be? What does work do for us? You know, how does it fit with our identity?
That's a hobby. That's not a real job, right? I mean, think about it. There's a generation, maybe depending on where you fall and how old your parents are,
Yes.
just before us or our grandparents, that would have been completely the only mindset. Get a good job, stay there, retire there, get your 25-year watch, and you're good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So gosh, there's a really lovely image you've brought into my mind. So when I went to one of my clients, which was Kellogg in Sydney for the first time, I'd never seen anything like this, but you walk into the reception and the wall is ceiling to floor covered in the names of people who've been in this business for 25 years.
Oh.
Out loud and proud they were. Within 3 years, gone. Yeah. Most of the people had gone. But, you know, that generation celebrated that degree of stability. Yeah. And they identified being, you know, a 25-yearer at Kellogg. You know, I'd love to find some of those that exist now.
That's like a badge of honor where,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's interesting. Even when I was working in the corporate retail world still, it went from you kind of established yourself and your clientele in this one area, whatever store area you worked in, and you could really build a business of your own within the business of the corporate that you worked in. But I took a break and just freelanced for a while. And when I came back, the questions were completely different.
Ooh, in what way?
You know, you've been here 6 months or you've been here a year, you know, where are you going to next? Next? It had shifted from building a solid personal business within a business and a clientele that could rely on you being there to, well, we don't want you to get too comfortable and stagnant. We want you to move around every 6 months to a year or whatever. And it's like, it became, if you stayed too long, something was wrong with you, instead of, wow, you've built a strong business here for our business.
Really sad, isn't it? Really sad. But that's exactly what happened here. And, you know, I would look, so given that I was a headhunter, so I'd advertise in major press here, and I'd get 300 to 400 people applying for a CFO job. Yeah. And if they'd stayed for 25 years in one business, clients wouldn't accept it. There was a stigma attached to it. And even if that individual had had 15 jobs in 25 years, the battle that I would have with my clients to consider them worthy of the shortlist, even though they had everything I was looking for, all the cultural stuff I was looking for, the battle I would have would only be worth it on certain occasions. So there was a definite stigma attached to individuals who stayed in the same place for a long time. And I think what you're talking about is that complete cultural reversal, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That more than 2 years is stagnant.
Mm-hmm. Like somehow you're not going to be flexible enough. Mm-hmm. It's a version of flexibility, but what I found is a lot of times it wasn't a flexibility decision. The people that moved around a lot, they didn't know how to stay put.
Interesting. I think that's a really good angle. They didn't know how to stay put, but I think
they would get restless and leave. So they were never invested in the clientele or the area. Mm-hmm. They were always looking for the next thing. So it was almost like career ADD.
Yes, but also those individuals were being rewarded financially for moving more regularly. Yeah, they were not. Their wisdom, their experience, their ability to connect with clients over long term wasn't being rewarded. Their freshness was being paid very well.
And it was disruptive.
And disruptive to anybody who cared about quality and stability and increasing, you know, just
loyalty
doing work that
from,
mattered.
You know, the client to us.
Yeah.
You know, when clients are complaining at the lack of stability for the person and the environment that they want, because remember, we're comfort creatures.
They want the familiar.
They do
Yeah.
want the familiar. So there's this very interesting struggle going on. I know for me, before I left right before I turned 50, like 2 months before. And part of it was precipitated by corporate shift and the fact that I had a deadline. I was just done. So, but what the interesting thing is that shift in the company has accelerated. I can see how there's very much a reward for what appears to be flexibility. And when I was leaving, I had clients who were like, wait, who am I going to shop with? You're the only one who looks like me. And I who's going to answer my questions? And you realize that, if corporate could do better to mix it up instead of constant shift, I feel like there needs to be a foundation, and you can have some of that flow above it, like waves crashing on the shore. But maybe we've conditioned the world around us to this quote flexibility, but I still think that we can't control what corporate does. I just realize I'm having this, to something we can't shift. So how do we as individuals who still have work to do or need to work or want to work, because some people want to.
Oh, totally. Oh my goodness. I think in our generation, a few people might have the idea that they'd retire to a yacht, but work is indelibly printed in our identity. So I think I'll go so far as to say most of us want to work because we create value and feel valuable working. So what do we do? So we have to take control, and we have to design it around our superpowers, make sure we stay away from our kryptonite, which is the opposite of our superpowers, and evolve it. Even just the idea that you'd make one shift and that would be your last shift isn't ever going to be the situation. So it's almost a philosophy, an experimental philosophy. I build that into all of the design work that we do. And by that, I simply mean we have to shift all the time, but shifting is uncomfortable. So we have to build in to our DNA a philosophy of experimenting. Okay, so, and I mean this in life, but I talk about it mostly in terms of career, but we will always have to keep shifting a number of degrees. Are those clients still willing to pay us for using our superpowers? Do I need to go to different clients? Will they pay me more? Could I try this new program? And you're literally shifting the whole time. And that sort of nimble dynamism is a real shift for someone like myself who spent 20 years in one career. But it is learned, it is possible to learn it, necessary to learn it. And actually, I think the fear of failure that surrounds that experimental mind shift is what stops us. So we can train our brain to be experimental, start with teeny tiny experiments. One of the clients that was particularly stuck that I've worked with in the last few months, we literally started with him on day one, turning left instead of right on a dog walk. Yeah. Sitting in a different chair to watch Netflix. You know what I mean? The tiny little things. And obviously the world doesn't disintegrate when that happens. So we're training our brain that change is fine, change is fine, change is fine. And then when you point that then at your career, then you're just trying different things all the time. And there's no failure possible. The experiment can fail and you can tweak it, but you as an individual are not failing. You're just experimenting. And that probably is the philosophical change in career that makes the biggest difference and that increases potential enormously. Is that something you come across, Gina?
Yes, it's that fear of perceived failure. It's that, but what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
Or they've tried it before in their own mind, but they really haven't committed to it.
I see that a lot. Oh, I tried that before 6 months ago. Okay, but you investigate, what did they try? And how did they try it? And how, but it's vulnerable. You have to be, it's really hard. If your identity is based around a certain type of success from 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and you haven't reevaluated that whole thing, it's all connected, isn't it? You
Mhm.
can't do the experiments because you know they're going to fail, because you're no longer the finance director that you thought you were in that business that you identified with. So there's some basic work that needs to happen before that, but experimentation, I think, is crucial.
While I'm processing this, I'm thinking one of the things I encourage people to do if they really can't see what their gifts and abilities are, or they don't really recognize how they impact the people around them, to find 3 to 5 people from different points of their life, not just family, not just friends, maybe someone you've worked with, maybe a manager, and ask them a few questions. What do you see that I bring to the world? What strengths do you see in me? What weaknesses do you see in me? How have I served you? Just kind of a few questions like that, because I think the perspective from outside of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
can get us moving in that direction, because when you're in the frame, you can't see. You need someone to reflect back at you something. We tend to only remember the negative reflections. We deflect the compliments, but we really need to learn to receive those and use them as the crumbs, the guideposts, the things that are like, this is the right direction. How it plays out, I mean, we might want to put it in a specific box, like, oh, I'm good at administration, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, so I need to be a boss or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But really, like I hear you saying, the experimentation is, how else could I?
Exactly. Sorry to talk over you. Exactly. How else could I? If I'm good. So I'll give you an example. I find it really hard to do small talk. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the small talk where you stand in a room and that whole awful networking. But I can't stop having big conversations with anybody who will listen. So I go to the supermarket and we end up talking about a funeral they've been to, or I go to a school playground, or I go to a funeral. Oh my God, I've had some of the best conversations in life at funerals because people are in that. I can't stop having big conversations. So in my old career, I did have big conversations, but they were limited. Yeah, I'm now designing my career around big conversations that do not get any deeper than challenging identity. So I will do this. So I'd love to do this sometime when I'm a little bit older for 16 to 18-year-olds, which I think are being educationally failed in terms of career thought. And I'd love to do that as a volunteer. I would love, so there's millions of problems or opportunities for me to point my superpowers at, but it has to be right for the right time. I need to fit it into the right career and what I'm expecting. So that kind of experimentation, I've done some bereavement counseling, for instance, and training, because I need to have big conversations. And again, how could you have any bigger conversations than a giant loss from your life? So I think there's millions of ways to experiment. The nuggets are just knowing what your superpowers are, and then you can experiment for the rest of your life.
And by experiment, it's shifting from the one thing I do forever in terms of the job itself to the one thing, 2 things, 3 things I'm really good at, and the hundreds of ways, if you will, that can be applied. That's the shift, isn't it?
That is the perfect shift. So if we were to see that shift in 3 circles, so the first circle would be my superpowers. Yeah, so I've explained that. The second circle would be a super problem for others that matters to me. And then the third circle is people will pay me for doing this.
I think that's a confidence issue.
Okay. Tell me what you mean.
Because I've come across people that are like, I want to work with you. But there's a threshold financially in people's minds. If you don't charge enough, you don't get work. Like there's a weird, and you have to figure out where that is.
And that's an experiment in itself, isn't it?
Yes, because if you don't charge enough, you're not valuable enough in a weird sort of way. So when you think you're helping people by pricing fairly, if you will, you're only being fair to them on paper, but they're not. People need to put skin in the game. Both of us. Our skin is, I offer this value, and I know the shifts that I provide for people. This is what it's worth.
And that's what it's worth to you. But if you doubled your prices, there would be a different group of people who find that valuable. So those are the experiments. So for instance, I said I would never do free work again. Now that's really harsh, isn't it? Yeah, there are people who need my skills that I have in the past offered to help for free, but they don't put skin in the game, so they don't make the changes, and I feel bad, and I feel like I'm dragging them to where they want to go, when actually I'm not sure they do want to go, because they didn't want to invest and put some skin in the game.
Yeah, that's the truth. And I think it is not kind to do for someone what they should be doing for themselves. We're not helping people. In other words, it's a fundamental relationship skill to say, what are they saying versus what are they doing? I'm in a relationship with someone, blah, 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 actions, actions, actions. Do they line up? Totally. And we shouldn't be dragging people. I have been there, and it's exhausting, and it takes the joy out of what you do. And then you realize we feel responsible. Our responsibility was we never called them higher.
Yeah, totally. We didn't call them out, you know? And then you have to think, oh God, you know, what's that about me? Is that my self-esteem or self-worth? And then we go around in a circle. But it's another experiment, isn't it?
Yes.
By working with those people, I didn't fail. I've learned something super, super valuable that now goes into the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's a brilliant shift, is to quit judging everything black and white, right, wrong, good, bad.
It's all gray. Everything's gray.
Oh, isn't that the truth? I think that's probably one of the greatest lessons as we grow older, is really recognizing that the lines aren't as firm as we thought they were, not becoming negative with that reality, you know, but dancing with the blur is what I would call it.
I love that. I love that phrase, dancing with the blur. Yeah, so that's, you're interacting with it. You're not judging it. You're moving with it. You're trialing it. You're stepping back in and out. Love that language. Really love that language. What I love about it is that you're moving. Yeah, you're not stuck.
Because I think we can be just as stuck with everything's gray, the lines are blurred. I don't know. There's nothing, you know, like you could take there's nothing else I can do to there's nothing you could take the same attitude and apply it to any situation. So back to what you were saying earlier, it's that paradigm shift between our ears. It really is a mindset conversation. It's shifting and challenging the beliefs that we have, right? You're talking about building into our DNA a philosophy of experimentation. We have to build it.
We have to build it. You're right. You have to build it. And that's an internal conversation with self or with help from someone like you or me. That's an internal conversation. The experimentation is the action and interaction with the internal work. That's where the dancing happens. Yeah. And then you come back into self going, how was that experiment? Was it painful? So for instance, I'll give you an example. I don't love being in front of a camera, but it was getting in the way of my business success, my fear of being in front of a camera. So maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I made a challenge to make 30 videos in 3 weeks, and I did it. And I'm not afraid anymore. I literally cannot believe it. It doesn't mean I'm good at it. Crikey, I'm working on that, and I'll be working that forever. But the fear has totally disappeared. But it disappeared in the action. It didn't disappear in my head. You know, that was a reaction, is that it disappeared in my head. Is that a good example? Does that kind of explain it?
Yeah, it's like the paper tiger, that perpetual paper tiger. In our mind, there's this tiger. It's the fear, it's the failure, it's the this isn't going to work, and no, I have to have the 401k, the insurance, the this and the that, or everything's not going to work out. Like if I don't have these things in place, then I'm not legitimately working, I'm not legitimately providing, or whatever it is. And then the paper tiger means when you challenge that fear and you punch it, you realize it was never solid.
Love it. Love it. The paper tiger. It was never solid. It's built in our mind. It's a creation of our own mind. But the only way you'd be able to punch it is by taking action.
Exactly. So it's very much when you talk about building into our DNA, we have to recognize that we've already built a structure.
Some other stuff that we may need to reconfigure or to, I'm not saying knock down. It's rarely a knock down. It's just, do we want that in the future?
Remodel.
Yes. What remodel? It's a slight remodeling. Sometimes it's a big remodel, but it's never a crash and burn and start again ever.
Yeah. You're not of the burn your boats.
No, I think we have to be gentle with our midlife selves.
Yes.
You know, we've worked hard to get here. We're not going to crush it, but only, it does need a bit of first step bravery to get out of our head. You know, I've got lots of clients who love the internal thinking, let's do another one of those assignments where you ask me hard questions, and they love that. They love it. And those are the kind of people who read self-help books all the time.
I love all the thinking. I get in trouble for it.
Okay, so you find the experimentation bit a little bit harder, or?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably, you know, because, well, I think seasonally different things come up and you don't see your time the same way, or your time shifts. I think there is an ebb and a flow to timing as well. Totally. Like, what can you do? You know, like you said, those gin gals, there was only so much they could do. And I think not stopping with only the little bit you can do is maybe one of those micro shifts that you were talking about.
Yes, not stopping. Just keep going. So start is the most important. And keep going.
Step one. Start.
Do something. Yeah. Then do something different. But stop, analyze, refine. Stop, analyze, refine. You know, it's
so funny. I think people probably have done that within the confines of their work because there's so much structure. And that's the other thing I want to ask you. We get used to the structure, right? You clock in, or depending on your job, you may or may not use a time clock, but essentially at 9 or 8, I go to work. And I know I need to do this by this time and talk to that person. Everything's very much auto-fed. And I think some of the fear comes from not having really thought about organizing your own day for 20, 25 years. Totally. Like, it's a nice dream, but if you haven't done it, it's a bit overwhelming.
Totally. So, and you know that, don't you? You know, how do people organize their Saturday and Sundays? You know, if their working week is organized like that. But it's a real mind blower to have time. And I know this because lots of my clients have been made redundant without, you know, a moment's thought, and without enough planning. And they almost all thought it would be great to have some time. And then they wake up on day 14, because it has been lovely for the first 7 or 8 days, going, oh my God, what am I going to do? And the crucial part of that is we humans rarely ask ourselves, what do we want? What do I want to do? What do I want out of this day? What do I want from my relationships? What do I want? And it's the hardest question that I've ever been asked is, what do you want? Dead easy to answer what you don't want, but nearly impossible. And so if you're staring down the barrel of 12 free hours, how do you want to fill them? You know, it's filled with opportunity, but it's also scary as anything.
Mm-hmm. Because you haven't done that before.
Well, when do you know, the last time you did it was probably when you were a child, but you still had school or uni or something. You know, maybe those big breaks, if you went to uni, those big breaks in the summer. And most of us worked through them because we needed to pay for university. So when was the last time we as humans stopped and had whole days? You know, you can see why that's difficult.
Well, I think there's a detox period, right? Where, oh, it feels so good not to have to get up.
Totally. So their life has been filled with have tos.
Yes. Now I get to do what?
What's the want to, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's if you've never thought about that before, that could send you in a spin.
Well, and then you have to go back to those paradigms of just because you want to, you have to believe too. You know, you have to shift to, can I do this? Mm-hmm. And the yes, you can. And then experimenting to find the way that can happen. So we've had a really fantastic, broad kind of conversation on a narrow topic. So if somebody were in this place, or they're approaching this place, or they've already been in this place and they're on the other side, still not sure, what are 3 anchor points that you can offer to help people move in a direction that puts them in a place of satisfaction with what they're doing and who they are and how they're living out their days? I mean, this is even people who love their jobs, but maybe are approaching that age where they're seeing that nobody's there. So, I mean, it really does apply across the board. So what anchor points do you have, Lucia?
So I would encourage any individual in those situations to take, I'm going to get real practical here. So to take an A4 piece of paper, split it into 4 parts. On the first quadrant, I want you to write down what you were doing when people complimented you. Yeah. Then I'm going to ask you in the second quadrant to say, list a range of things, of activities that you've been doing where you've enjoyed them. And that's from beginning to end of your career. And I want you to go tiny things, not managing people in this situation, in this time, in this type of person. Yeah. In the third quadrant, what can you not stop doing in life? Often those things will annoy the life out of somebody. So they'll have complained to you that you can't stop doing this. So you'll know those things. And the final quadrant is, what do you enjoy helping others do? Once you've filled in those as much as you humanly can and asked other people, just like you suggested, Gina, there are patterns in there that will lead you to the exact activities that you want to do in your future, that you want to get paid to do, and then start experimenting with those. But that starter 1-pager is exactly what I advise you to do if you're just beginning to think about this.
That's an incredible tool, really, because there's 4 things to consider. And I feel like it's not a task. This is a journey. Those 4 things that you're asking, it's not probably going to be a one-time.
No,
job.
Ideally that would take weeks, because that investigation process, you'd ask your sister, your brother, your children, your ex-colleagues, you'd have another coffee with someone else, and you'd, a little bit like you said, but I just on 1 page of paper that you carry in your back pocket everywhere for 3 weeks. The shift, if that's what you're thinking about for 3 weeks, a shift will have happened.
What you focus on grows.
What you focus on grows. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's an incredible resource. I love that. Now, how can people get a hold of you, Lucia?
So my website is called midlife-unstuck.com, and I'm on LinkedIn all the time.
Awesome. Which makes total sense.
That's where my people are.
Yes, exactly. So, Lucia, I want to thank you so much for reaching out to me and giving me the opportunity to connect with you. And it's so wonderful to connect with someone who is vibrant and passionate and excited. I mean, people can't see what I can see, but the hand motions and the sparkling eyes and just the joy that you bring to this conversation. And I can sense your heartbeat for people to really realize the greater joy, contentment, happiness, fulfillment that's possible for them, even more so after 50. And it's such a different paradigm. And I'm so grateful for the way you bring that message, the joy. Thank you so much for sharing this with my tribe today.
Gina, that was the most amazing conclusion. Please, can you say that again so I can record it? It was wonderful. Thank you. I've had such good fun.
Recording.
Thank you so much. I have had such good fun talking to you.
Yes. Well, this is a resource, I think, that definitely speaks to my audience, because there are a lot of people who are still working or who need to go back to work, who haven't worked for a while, like women who maybe have raised their children. This is such a powerful conversation. So I'm so grateful that you came today. And friends, if you want to get in touch with Lucia, she is at midlife-unstuck.com. So lucia-knight is a midlife career satisfaction designer and author of Exchange: How to Torch Your Work Treadmill. If you head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 201, I'm going to have links to Lucia and her website, and there will be show notes. And while you're there, please leave your name and email address. Join my email list. I send out periodic encouraging emails. I don't spam. And please, friends, really take the time to take this exercise that Lucia has shared, these 4 parts, and take the time to ask yourself these questions. Whether or not you're in that moment of transition right now, you have so much potential. There's so much that you bring to this world. There's gifts and talents, as Lucia says, superpowers. And this is the season of living where we need to turn and face ourselves and really recognize the value that we bring to the workplace, to our relationships, and to our communities, and no longer push off the compliments, but stand in a powerful place and really receive the fact that you are here because you have something to do, and only you can do it the way that you do it. And that is true. Shift to that truth and walk in that truth and find that the second half of your life can be so much more satisfying on so many levels than you would ever imagine. So take the time to do a little bit of work and surround yourself with people who will think those ways with you so that you have a community of support as you make these shifts. And we'd love to hear from you. What did you get out of this? What inspired you? Share it with us so that we know what's going on. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, please share it with your friends and share Lucia's resources as well. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are so grateful that you took time to spend with us. We ask that, again, engage, share, take that step of courage, my friends. The world is waiting for you to show up. Thank you for listening. We look forward to talking with you all next week. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.